What's up, everybody? Marcion of Sinope is one of the original church leaders going back before the Council of Nicaea. And his version of Christianity, known as Marcionism, is very different from the Roman Catholic version. He taught that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, is not the God, the Father of Jesus, and that Yahweh was a lesser, evil, oppressive God. For me, connecting those dots was kind of a huge epiphany. Little did I know that some of the earliest Christians thought the same thing. Marcion was literally the first person to compile what we today call a Bible. And we really don't know how many of the early Christians believed what he did because the Church of Rome eradicated all of the heretics. And it sounds a lot like the side that had the most swords were the ones that decided what official canonical thought is and what'll get you torched. So do your own research, but I'm far from the first person to look at the actions of Yahweh in the Old Testament with, among other things, the burnt offerings, which just so happens to be what the false gods wanted, and then look at the teachings of Jesus and come to the conclusion that we are not talking about the same God here. And if you're a Christian, is it really the worst thing if you were to find out that your God isn't psychopathic? That eye for an eye mentality never had anything to do with Christianity in the first place? People assume since God gave Moses the Ten Commandments, then he loves us. We're his children. But that's not necessarily true. A prison guard can lay down morally based rules for the inmates and not do it because he loves them, but because he doesn't want them infighting. Right after the Ten Commandments you always hear about, it says this. If they get better after a day or two, then, that's fine. But if not, then they're to be punished. And then, of course, the full version of eye for an eye continues tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. This ain't exactly dropping deep philosophy because these weren't philosophical people. I mean, read the book. It's full of treachery and backstabbing, and the patriarch of the whole thing stole his brother's whole inheritance because he was starving, and he saw it as an opportunity. And then he tricks his father on his deathbed into thinking he was the other son, Esau, and giving him his blessing. And see, it's all a cute little cartoon to steal everything from your brother because, he just didn't care about it. It's not that he was starving or anything. But the moral of the story is basically if you've ever got your brother in a vulnerable spot, steal everything he owns. And then tell everybody, he just didn't value it enough. He shouldn't have given it up so easily. But I'm not entirely sure that the entity that showed up to Jacob and the one that showed up to Moses were one and the same. Yahweh tells Moses that his forefathers knew him by a different name, but now he wants to be known as Yahweh forever and ever. And by the way, can you write down the names of the 12 tribes so I don't forget? No, seriously. We'll get to that part because the breastplate is an important part of this. All right, so just pause everything you think you know about the Old Testament. You can pick that up on the way out. But let's do our best to look at this like this is a brand new story. You've never heard this before. And let's look at this with today's understanding of technology. And at the end, you can tell me if this sounds like an all-powerful creator of the universe or some being that flew around in a cloud of smoke and had some interesting party tricks like being able to control the rain and understood microbiology to where he could make boils break out or the livestock all got sick. Outbreaks of frogs, lice, flies, locusts, which sounds more like something Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies, would be in charge of instead of the true God. First off, before they ever leave Egypt, Yahweh tells them to take the blood of a lamb and put it over the door frames of their houses, so that when the Lord, Yahweh, goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he'll see the blood and know to pass over that house. This is where Passover comes from. And as you'll see, Yahweh loves his people covered in blood. This is the same thing as the red heifer sacrifice that I've been talking about, where they take the blood of the cow, mix it in with other very specific ingredients, and sprinkle it on the priests so that they are ritually pure. So there's something about blood that really stands out to Yahweh and will identify who are his followers and who are not. One of the first things that clued me in that Yahweh is a living physical being is that he can't be around yeast. To be in his presence, you have to have cut out all yeast for at least a week. Time and again, all throughout Exodus, he makes it very clear. No yeast, no yeast, no yeast. All these examples I'm showing is while they're still in Egypt, and he's about to come down and take out all the firstborn sons, and he triples down that nobody can have any yeast and be anywhere close to me, and he does this all throughout all of the rules of the tabernacle and everything. So here's the really crazy part. Did you guys know that when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he was glowing? Everybody was scared of him because he was glowing. You see how he's got light horns coming out? I can't remember what the problem was with the translation, but people up until recently pictured Moses as having horns. But Moses shone brightly with a light. And I don't think that glory means what we think it means. The original usage of that was not talking about God's spiritual presence. It is a literal physical force, and there's something giving that light off through that force. Whoever named this the glory effect, they knew the original meaning of glory. It's a light. Let's jump to 2 Chronicles. Solomon had just built the temple, I guess by the help of demons. See my video on that, but they put the ark in the temple, and they make a point of noting that there was nothing in the ark except for the 2 tablets, which could there have been more in the ark while they were out doing all their travels. But then all of the singers and trumpeters and cymbals make a big, huge ruckus. And then the house filled with a cloud, even the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand to minister by reason of the cloud, for the glory of Yahweh had filled the temple. The way I see this, glory is something akin to radioactive. Everyone has to protect themselves from this glory. I think that's why they anoint each other with oil. But just keep that in the back of your mind as I go through this. Moses wanted to see Yahweh's glory. And Yahweh said, well, you can't see my face, but I'll pass in front of you. And he says, I'm just doing this because I'm pleased with you and know you by name. That's a strange thing for the all-knowing God to say. Wouldn't he know everybody's name? But he tells Moses he has to hide in a crack in a rock and he'll put his hand over it as he passes by. But no man can see his face and live. So forget what you think you know about this. God's glory is something close to radioactive, and I have a lot of reasons I'm going to tell you why I think that. But a quick side note, Abraham meets God and 2 angels in Genesis and sits down and has food and drinks with them. And then Jacob wrestles with God and then gets the name Israel, one who wrestles with God, El being the name of God back at that time. And then Moses meets Yahweh, who says he's the God of his forefathers, but doesn't like that name anymore, wants to be called Yahweh. And his glory will end you if you get too much of it. No man shall see my face and live. Okay, what about the other 2 times before that? Are we talking about the same God here? It almost sounds like we can't be. The Mount Sinai story is a lot crazier than I think people give it credit for, because if you saw this, it would be freaky. Now, he tells Moses that the other people can't come up on the mountain. At first, it's just him and Aaron, and they have to be yeast-free and bathed. He says to put limits around the mountain, nobody can come past that, and I think one of the reasons is germophobic. Yahweh doesn't want yeast and bacteria around them, but I think the other reason is the glory that they get on them. If any person or animal touches the foot of the mountain, then they're to be put down. So they repeat things quite a bit, but Yahweh descended on top of the mountain, and for 6 days there was a dark cloud on top of the mountain with light coming out of it at times. The glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. On the morning of the 3rd day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. The whole mountain was covered with smoke, and this trumpeting sound is so loud that everything is just shaking. So this is a crazy, inner earth being UFO. You got to keep in mind, this whole trip out of Egypt, they've been following a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of light by night. So they're just seeing this big dark cloud up there with a jet thruster on the bottom of it or something. Anyway, after being up on the mountain and all the lightning and thunder and everything, Moses comes down and he's glowing. I don't know if he was given iodide pills to help against the glory, but let's move on forward and you'll see more reasons why I say this. Yahweh gives Moses very precise instructions on how he wants everything built. And again, the punchline, I think the tabernacle is building a hyperbaric chamber that this cloud of smoke descends on every night. The Ark of the Covenant is made of acacia wood, and then everything is plated in gold. Keep in mind the principle of you wear a lead jacket when you're getting an x-ray because and then gold is denser than the lead even, so less high energy particles can go through it. Now once the ark is built and everything in place, nobody can touch it. It's got too much glory to it. So they have to put 2 poles through it, which are both plated in gold again, so that nobody has direct contact with it. And then you've got the cherubim on top with their wings facing each other. And keep in mind that this thing apparently knocked down all the city of Jericho. Extra biblical traditions hold this as a weapon. And then it says something really peculiar here. There above the cover between the 2 cherubim, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for everybody else. So right here is where I'll meet with you. That's kind of a weird thing. Indiana Jones movies made the joke that this was a radio that God was on the other side of. So this is some kind of energy transmitter / weapon communication device thing. And if you look into the Urim and Thummim that they mention, these have been theorized to be communication devices. So you notice that square thing that the guy on the right is wearing. That is for Aaron and then later all the high priests to wear. It's solid gold with 12 gemstones set into it. But the high priest that gets them around the most glory, he has to wear this thing or it's going to wipe him out. Listen to how they describe this. A breastpiece for making decisions. It's to be solid gold with the 12 stones. And whenever Aaron enters the holy place, he'll bear this over his heart. Also put the Urim and Thummim in the breastplate, which nobody really knows what that is. Thus, Aaron will always bear the means of making decisions for everyone over his heart before the Lord. That's just a weird way of putting that. And then here's my ace in the hole. Aaron must wear bells so that he can be heard when he enters the holy place, so that Yahweh knows not to come out while he's in there or he'll overglory. So then Aaron has to make another pure gold plate thing to wear on his forehead, and he's supposed to wear a certain type of tunic, and after all these clothes are on, then anoint him, cover him in oil. Now, this could go both ways. It could be to protect Aaron and all of the Levites, all of the priestly class, that are the only ones that are even allowed to get anywhere close to the tabernacle, and Aaron the only one inside. So this could be to protect them from the glory, or to protect Yahweh from like germs and bacteria. Maybe the ointment will keep bacteria from coming off a person. But there is a certain type of oil and incense mixture that only the priest class can wear. It's punishable by the ultimate if anybody else makes this stuff. And anybody that gets near the tabernacle has to be slathered in this stuff. I always thought the anointing with oil seemed like a weird thing, but, now it's making a little bit of sense. Now, there's a lot more to the tabernacle than at first meets the eye. I'll just break this all down for you, but he's very precise on how everything's to be built. It's a linen curtain, multiple linen curtains, and then you cover all of that in ram skins. And then there's a very specific recipe for an anointing oil, and you use this oil to anoint the entire tent. Now, just thinking about that, you've got thick ram skins on the outer layer, and then you throw a casing of oil all over that, basically making it airtight and making a hyperbaric chamber where this cloud descends every night. And all of the utensils, all the tables, everything is gold plated, and they start referring to it as being holy. Again, something close to radioactive. The gold would do the least amount of transmission of anything. And then you have big, thick curtains separating the most holy place from the tent in general. And for Aaron to go into the most holy place, then you have to be covered in gold and oil so it doesn't wipe you out. And you got to wear bells because if Yahweh accidentally comes in while you're in there, then you're gone. And then he says to make a huge courtyard around the tent that nobody's allowed to come any closer than that. The north side shall be 100 cubits, so like 300 feet long, and have curtains up. And then the priests are to make regular burnt offerings right outside of the entrance of the tent because it's a pleasing aroma for burning animals. So if you don't have this pictured in your head quite yet, just look at it like this. They're following around a big, huge pillar of smoke and fire. This thing lands on top of Mount Sinai and scares everybody half to death with all the intense glory shining out from the cloud and everything. And then eventually they build a tent to it so that Yahweh can descend at night and eat. I mean, that's literally what it says here. It's a food offering to Yahweh. And then that tent is built to precise dimensions to accept whatever's coming down out of the sky. It's covered around the outside with ram skin that is slicked out with an oil, so it's literally a hyperbaric chamber with so much glory inside of it that it'll fry anybody that comes near it without the proper protection on. So is any of this making sense to any of you guys? Because it definitely puts a picture in my mind. And that picture is something really close to Yahweh being a radioactive alien that's afraid of getting a yeast infection. Like War of the Worlds, you know how in that it was the common cold that took out all of the alien invaders? And I'll probably have to talk more about the Ark at some point because it seems like that was some crazy energy source that would topple towns and demolish their enemies. Anyway, I hope you guys saw my side of where I say that the Old Testament is a lot weirder than anybody's given it credit for. It's actually a really strange story if you go read it. Static out.